and welcome to another edition of Business and Financial Raw Talk. I am LaWanna Bradford, Chief Operating Officer of the Bradford Group, as well as Principal of the Bradford Group Consulting. And for those of you that may be joining Business and Financial Raw Talk for the first time, this is a platform where we bring new ideas, solutions, strategies to help push the needle so that women and men in business can elevate and expand and be the impact and influence that they want to be in the world. And I am so excited because today we have a very special guest, Miss Rose Hampton. Rose, how's it going?
Really great, LaWanna. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. And I want to tell the audience just a little bit about who Rose Hampton is. Rose Hampton is a retired executive with 35 years experience with Fortune 10 companies. She has served as Chief Operating Officer and Senior Vice President in her many roles. She came up through the ranks in the company and was recognized as a top 100 performer and Black achiever. She is an advocate and she includes small business consulting and coaching in all that she does. She enjoys traveling, cooking. She is a mother of 3, grandmother of 5, and she is the cousin to civil rights icon, Miss Rosa Parks, and she shares her yes spirit. And so today we are going to be talking about the dynamic and legacy of Miss Rosa Parks, but from a very different angle. And I want to just pitch it to you, Rose, to just tell a little bit about how we're going to structure this platform from what people have experienced in the past when they think of Rosa Parks.
Thanks, LaWanna, and thank you for that lovely introduction. Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to have yet another conversation about just a warm, wonderful, and accomplished woman. And usually when we have a conversation about Rosa Parks, we're talking about the Alabama bus boycott and her life and her role in history. And I thought maybe today we could have a conversation from a slightly different point of view. We're human beings, yes?
Yes.
But more often, our conversation is more like we're human doings. We're always having conversations about what we did or what got done or what she did like that. And so I thought maybe today we'd focus on some of who Rosa Parks was being that had her sit, that had her stand, that had her accomplish what she accomplished. And we can look at the conversations that she left us from who she was being point of view. I thought that would be interesting, and I'd like to see where that takes us.
I love that. And what I'm going to do is show a presentation here, because for some of you, we have different generations on our platform. Some of you may not know a lot about Rosa Parks. It is possible. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Rose, to just give a little introduction before we go into some of these very impactful characteristics that are for today's woman.
Perfect, LaWanna. So just a little bit about Rosa and the Alabama bus boycott. So I love this slide. I love this picture of Rosa, and I love what Rosa said, right? She said at the time that she was arrested, she had no idea what she was starting, right? What this would all turn into. It was just a day like any other day. The only thing that made it really significant was that the masses of people joined in. So I love starting here because, today your audience is joining in with us to have this conversation, and participation is what makes a difference. So yes, Rosa sat, but the entire community participated and together created an opportunity for us as a race class of people that we're working from that platform today as we, go forward in inclusion and equity and diversity. So if you'll turn.
I love that introduction, Rose, because most people, when you look at being that catalyst to life-changing movements, you typically don't wake up and say, today I think I'm going to start a movement.
That's right.
It was just the perfect opportunity with the perfect circumstances that allowed her to be this catalyst that continues to, I think, serve as a wind beneath our wings as we still move and press forward to those issues that are still very relevant today.
Yeah, so true, LaWanna. Before I talk about the slide, I'll just add that, Rosa said she really wasn't paying attention because she had a run-in with this particular bus driver on a couple of prior occasions. And she said if she had been paying attention, if she had noted that he was driving the bus, she would not have gotten on. But she didn't. She got on, she paid her money, got off, went to the back door, got on and took a seat in the colored section of the bus. And then as more white passengers got on the bus and there were no more seats available for white passengers, the bus driver kept moving the sign that said colored only back a row until it finally got to where Rosa was sitting. And she was upset. She was like, here, to herself, right? Oh, here we go again, right? And he asked her to move and she didn't. And then finally he said to her, if you don't get out of that seat, I'm going to have you arrested. And in her quiet, inimitable, and respectful way, she said, sir, you may do that. And sat. And it was just in that moment. Some people say, oh, she was, she had worked all day, she was tired. No, she was tired of giving in to that kind of injustice. And in that moment, she chose to sit. And that was the spark. One never knows, does one?
I love that. And I love that you're here, Rose, because you're helping dispel some of the myths. They take on a life of their own. And I heard that story that she was just tired, had worked all day, but you're giving a different perspective. She was tired of the systems, of the oppression, of being considered less than or invisible. And she's like, if you must, you must.
Yes. And you'll see in some of these pictures that I'm going to show you. So let's move on, right? All right. So on that fateful day in 1955, Rosa sat. And she was arrested and fingerprinted. And we actually have one of those pictures as well. And we'll look at her face in a minute. And then, interestingly enough, it was Joanne Robinson was the president of the Women's Political Council. And it was Joanne Robinson who actually organized a one-day bus boycott, right, following Rosa's arrest. And that boycott lasted 381 days. Talk about participation, right? But there were so many things that went on that had the Alabama bus boycott persist until it was actually successful and caused change. So first of all, Martin Luther King, right, came to the front and took leadership of the movement. So that was the beginning of his taking leadership in that role and in the entire movement, right, for equal rights. And Martin Luther King was a superb organizer, and he, was really with the people, organized the people, met with the people on a weekly basis, checked in with them. How are you doing? Are you getting your needs met? Are you getting to work? Are you feeding your family? Are you, are you able to successfully overcome the harassment, right? Because, there was a force on the other side trying to break this all up. It wasn't just, easy peasy lemon squeezy, let's just do this again tomorrow, right? There was lots going on in the background to try to squelch the boycott. So it was a rough go, but Martin stayed with the people, organized the people, and that boycott lasted 381 days. Ultimately, it led to the filing of a lawsuit that was taken to an Alabama district court, and the Alabama district court concluded that the Montgomery bus laws were in violation of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And of course, the city of Montgomery pushed back, eventually went to the Supreme Court, and they ended up upholding the decision of the Alabama District Court. And that was a full 91 years after slavery had so-called been abolished. But that's a whole nother story, so we won't go there. But that was the beginning of Rosa's life as the mother of the civil rights movement. Shall we go on? All right, so some pictures. All right, so most of these are from the family scrapbooks. And these are Rosa's ancestors. So I find this fascinating, right? I asked the question, was Rosa actually positioned by history, by her ancestry, as well as fate to be the one? So let's look at some of Rosa's ancestors. These first two pictures at the top, right? We're going from left to right. The first two pictures are of Rosa's, these are Rosa's great-grandparents. The first one is Stephen Clendenin, who was a plantation owner. And next to Stephen is Elizabeth, who was a slave on his plantation. And Stephen Clendenin and Elizabeth, now this is a younger picture of Stephen and an older picture of Elizabeth, because this is what we have, right? But at some point in their lives, I assume Elizabeth was a lot younger. Stephen Clendenin and Elizabeth had two children, and one of them was Rosa's grandfather. And we'll see him in just a moment. And then the next picture, well, that's interesting. We're trying to reconfirm who he actually is. We think he was Colonel Henry Macaulay, an officer in the Confederate Army. But we're working, we found a historian that we want to work with. We want to verify that that's who it is. But we know this is definitely one of Rosa's great-grandparents. And then next to him is another of Rosa's great-grandparents, and that her name is Gyogi, and she is a Poarch Creek Indian who had a relationship with Rosa's great-grandfather after his marriage ended. So all of these, a plantation owner, one of his slaves, potentially a colonel in the Confederate Army, a Poarch Creek Indian. What a diverse background, right, that her great-grandparents were. And these people all came of age in the 1830s, around the 1830s. And then Stephen Clendenin and Elizabeth had this son, Anderson Macaulay, and Anderson Macaulay married Louisa Collins, and they had 13 children. And one of them was James Macaulay, who married Leona Edwards, and those are Rosa's parents. Now, Anderson and Louisa came of age in the 1860s. That was the time when Abraham Lincoln was elected as president, and there was the Emancipation Proclamation and the Civil War, and then following the Civil War, the coming of Jim Crow laws. So all of that was kitchen table conversation for Rosa's parents. And then in the 1890s, Rosa's parents came of age. And that was about the time of Plessy versus Ferguson. And Plessy versus Ferguson was another case, but this one was in Louisiana. And this was the laws for train ridership. And Plessy was 1/8 African American, but he sat in the white car and he made it known who he was, and they asked him to move. And he refused to move, and we had the same kind of situation going on where we had the Supreme Court looking at the laws of separate but equal. Only this time the decision didn't actually go in our favor. And separate but equal was declared okay. And we know, boy, that was a setup for Jim Crow big time. So this is what Rosa, these are the conversations, the family conversations that Rosa came from. Isn't that interesting, LaWanna?
Yeah, it is, and it's sometimes when we are impressed at a younger age, whether it's from past stories, the storytelling of our ancestors to us, or our observation of what's happening, we don't realize until we're in the situation and we look back. Hindsight is 2020. How it has influenced us for that pivotal moment in time.
Yes. So flip the page. This is like a storybook. All right. So here's Rosa's family portrait. So here's a picture of this adorable little girl. I thought I'd show you. But then next to it is a family portrait. So you see Rosa here, and she looks to be about what, we'd say about 3 years old, something like that, 3 or 4, and her mom and dad. Now this is so interesting because I was doing a presentation for Black History. I think it was just last year. And there was someone in the viewing audience who was in the film industry. And he raised his hand and said, "Did you realize that those are not their real clothes? Those clothes are staged and the photographer put the heads on them." And, I didn't know that before, and I had never noticed that before. But in that moment, I was so moved to think, doesn't matter, whatever their station in life was at the time, if that's not the kind of clothes they wore on a daily basis, this is still the picture that sat on the mantle in the living room that Rosa looked at every day that she walked by. And that's who she saw herself as, right? Because you don't look down at yourself every day to see what you're wearing. That's the picture she got to look at of herself. And that's who she saw herself. I am somebody. I'm loved. I matter. Me too. Right? So I was so moved, and I was actually grateful to him for pointing that out. So
And that's so powerful because we know with women there's so many issues that we have as far as self-actualization, just embracing and celebrating the beauty of who we are, and sometimes it's what we see reflected back at us. And Rosa was positioned to see, as you mentioned, this beautiful family setting, the support, this love. And so every day, that's, whether it was consciously or unconsciously, was impressed upon her being.
Yes. Yes. And so, I love that you said that, LaWanna, because, sometimes on Facebook or some of the, social media apps, I see friends and other people that I associate with will put up these gorgeous photos. You can Photoshop so much stuff now, you can have a glamour shot, or there's so many things you can do, right? So we can, right now in this moment, we can encourage women to have an image of yourself that reflects back to you who you want to be, how you want to be seen. And take and have that somewhere where you see it all the time. Why not see yourself like that, right? Rosa got to see herself like that little girl in that sassy little dress with her parents, in grand style.
Love it.
So this is one of my favorite pictures of Rosa, right? I don't have a lot to say about this other than when I look at this picture, I see this beautiful, vibrant, clear-eyed, present, powerful person. What do you see, LaWanna?
I see the same thing. I see a woman who is, this picture just looks like there's hope. There's hope in her eyes. There's actually, I also see expectation for something on the horizon. And the one thing that I like about this is history has depicted Rosa, and this is just from my experience, as this elderly woman who wasn't going to give up her seat. But she wasn't old at that time.
She was not.
She was not. But in your mind, that's what you're thinking. Oh, they were picking on poor little old Rosa. And it's like, no, she was in her prime.
She was. She was. She was in her prime. And this picture is just a perfect example of that, right? Just vibrant.
Yes.
All right. Next. So I titled this slide Excellence. So Rosa was a seamstress, and she worked for, I think it was called Montgomery Fair. It was a major department store. It was like, like the Bloomingdale's of Montgomery in the 1950s. And she was a seamstress. And so, the Macaulay family was known for excellence. They were builders, they were educators. Rosa was a seamstress. And she was known and sought after and in demand for her skills as a seamstress in the community. And it was interesting because it played a huge role in the decision to use Rosa to push the test case against the 14th Amendment because of her status in the community. Back then there was all that. There was a lot of formal social entertaining, and a lot of, presenting young women, at their coming out. So a lot of debutante balls and that sort of thing in the upper social strata of the community. And they came to Rosa to do those alterations of their debutantes' ball gowns and stuff like that. So she's very well known and very well liked in the community. And so when they arrested Rosa, it was like, what? They arrested Rosa? It's like something's wrong here. So that's interesting about excellence, right? I came across this accidentally, but it was so perfect because I was thinking, oh, your talents always make room for you. And so I said, well, I think that's a scripture. And I went to look it up. Proverbs 18:16. This is the Amplified version. A man's gifts, I'm going to change it. A woman's gifts, I'm going to change it. Our gifts, we can include everybody, right? We're all about inclusion here. Given in love or courtesy, makes room for us and brings us before great men. I was like, that's extraordinary, right? Our gifts do make room for us. LaWanna, you know all about that. That's why we're here today.
And I love that. And for those of you that may just be joining us, we're here with Rose Hampton, Rosa Parks' cousin, and we're talking about empowering characteristics for today's woman using the beingness of Rosa Parks, and starting with the first trait, which is excellence. And it is so important that when we show up, that we show up authentic, that we show up in our truth, in our brilliance, and realize that, and this is one of the things I always say, Rose, is that we have been divinely impressed here for this appointed time by the hand of God. And when you realize that you are unique for this point in time, you show up a little bit differently. You take ownership in your life rather than being that wallflower just waiting for things to happen. And like you said with Rosa, her gifting was in her creativity. She was a creator in what she did as a seamstress. And it did make way for her. She had already established this reputation so that when the law came and said we need to lock you up, it automatically drew attention simply because of who she was already being within the community.
Yes, yes. Perfect, LaWanna. So, just one last point, right? There's also another saying, and it goes, and you might help me out to get this right, but it also says, your talents will make room for you in places where maybe your character won't keep you. So there's something for us to take away from that as well, right? Because
Yes.
Rosa had both the gift of the gift of excellence in her skill set. But she also had the character, right? That not only kept her there, but actually, buoyed up Rosa as the perfect candidate for testing the law.
Yeah.
All right. Participation and listening. Yes, Rosa was an activist already. She had been working with the NAACP. She was actually the first secretary of the Alabama NAACP. She was actually introduced to the NAACP by her husband, Raymond Parks, and she became active. It was the fulfillment of her heart thinking, right? It's she had always asked and wondered and inquired, why are things this way? It shouldn't be this way. Yeah. It's really interesting. On one of the presentations that I did, I showed a picture of a map of the world. And then I overlaid the average skin tone by country. And the darkest browns occurred around the equator. And the further you got away from the equator, the skin tones, right, became tans and then eventually whites and pinks and yellows. But it was absolutely correlated to the distance to or from the equator. What's that got to do with anything? It has nothing to do with how bright, how strong, right? How thoughtful. It was strictly a function of time in the sun. Right? You sit on the beach for a couple of hours, you'll get a tan that lasts a couple of days, right? But if you live near the equator for 10,000 years, guess what? The human body will adjust. Scientifically, the human body will adjust to the conditions under which you live. So, maybe racism doesn't have anything to do with race. Maybe it's just a construct in language for financial and power purposes. That's what I think, anyway. I couldn't help but.
That's a brilliant statement. That was a golden nugget for you all to chew on, and that is definitely a show in and of itself. And I am 100% in agreement with you on that one.
I couldn't help but throw that in. We hit that point, right? But anyway, so Rosa participated. She didn't hesitate to go ahead and use her time and energy in pursuit of something that mattered to her. The other notation I made on this slide was listening, because it's very clear that she is listening to what Martin Luther King is saying. And I love that when I saw that, because listening, listening can be done at such a shallow level or at such a depth. And I think Rosa listened with a depth that made a difference in what she chose to do and in what she chose to say. There's a level of listening that will give us what there is to say, rather than something that we already think. I was in a lecture one time, and it was, it was a non-denominational thing, and it was outside of the church, so I didn't expect to hear the word God come up in the lecture. But anyway, the lecturer had said something, and I went to make a note. And obviously, while I was making the note, I was not listening. And then I heard the word God, and I was like, what did I miss? So I asked the person sitting on my left, what did he say? And they said, I don't know how to repeat it. I was like, I'm not the only one who wasn't listening, right? So I asked the person on my right, I'm sorry, I can't recreate what he said. I was so disappointed. So when the lecture ended, we all went to lunch. I walked into the lunchroom, into the restaurant. And the lecturer was sitting at a table by himself with his lunch. Obviously, he was waiting for, the person he was going to have lunch with. And I said, can I interrupt you? And he said, sure, sit down. Very lovely, right? And so I explained to him what had happened. I said, could you repeat what you said? He started laughing. He said, no. When I'm lecturing, I'm speaking, I'm present to something, I'm speaking it. I cannot tell you exactly what I said, but I do know where I was speaking from. Would you like me to just talk with you a little bit? And I said, yes, please. And what he said was, well, I can't tell you what he said. I actually can't recreate what he said, but I got a picture that has lasted with me for, ever since then. You know how you throw a rock in a pond of water and you get a kersplash? I got the picture. That's how we listen. Like when the rock hits the water, we hear something. And then all of a sudden, we're in our heads and we're thinking what we're thinking about, or what we think about what the person said, or how we would respond to what they said. And we stop listening. But there is the possibility of listening to what God said, like the waves that go out from the splash. Like, listen. And maybe when you get to the edge of the listening, that's where we hear God. That's what he had. That's the essence of what he had said about listening. That's the kind of listening that gives you a whole different place to stand. That's the kind of listening that, I don't know, I say stiffens your spine. You know what I mean? It's like a solid, I got it.
And it makes you, I believe, more expansive as a person. As you said, when you get out of your own head and you just allow yourself to be basked with whatever information is coming to you, allowing yourself to understand before you respond. And as you said, if that kerplash is like that instant to cause us to, lean in a little bit, now let's pay attention to the ripple effects.
Yeah.
And what do we do with that? Because I know for me, one of the most frustrating things is when you're talking and you haven't even finished a thought and someone is automatically jumping right in and you're thinking, well, I wasn't going that way.
Yeah, exactly. And it also gives us the opportunity to recreate relationship, because maybe you'll hear the fullness of the other human being who's speaking in an entirely different way if you're willing to grant that kind of listening. Because Rosa was so compassionate. Where did she get that from? Maybe from her listening, right? All right. I think this speaks for itself. I love this. I can't believe the post office put out a poster like this. She remained seated and the mountains moved instead. I just love this, right? So bravo to the U.S. Post Office. We don't have such good things to say about the U.S. Post Office. And we can go on to the next, because here's how the stamp actually came out. Courage. right? So if you were able to get your hands on a sheet of these stamps, you should have the word courage on it. Extraordinary courage.
The one thing I want to add with commitment and courage, and this is speaking to women, we tend to wear a lot of hats and we're doing a lot of things, and we realize, wait a minute, am I really operating in my lane of excellence? Am I really unfolding in my life that vision that I saw for myself? And we have to be committed, tapped in, tuned in, sold out for us. We have to have something that we believe in that propels us forward. Otherwise, we're just merely existing and kind of taking up space with no opportunity for impact. And I think with Rosa Parks, she was committed long before she took a stand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Long before.
Long before. Thanks, LaWanna. That was awesome. Now, generosity. Talk about generosity. Right? This is the epitome of generosity. She gave so much. She lost her job, her home, her community. They moved from Alabama within 2 years of the bus boycott incident. And she was willing to give up her marriage and, if necessary, her life. That is the epitome of generosity. And even though I titled this slide Generosity, I just do want to take a moment and ask you to look at her face. Do you see anger, fear, upset? This is not a staged photo. This is the real deal. Look at the face. It's just clear commitment, intention, and complete generosity.
Yeah, I look at it and I think about, the story of Esther in the Bible, and, the words were, if I perish, I perish. But there was just a sense of boldness and integrity in what she did and how she approached the king. And that's kind of the same thing here. It's like she didn't know what the next day was going to hold for her.
Yes.
But she's there. It's like, okay, I'm here. I'm in it. There's no turning back now.
I'm in it to win it. You can go forward. And there you have it, right? She was committed. This goes right to what you said, LaWanna. She was always committed. She was always about access, equity, and inclusion. And so, here you go. Now you can enter the bus from the front, pay your fare, and take any seat that you choose. And that was not at all the way it was.
The one thing that I think about, Rose, that is, it's just the African American journey, that, again, the things that she and others fought for, bled for, died for.
Yeah.
We are still fighting today, this access, equity, inclusion, belonging, diversity. It's amazing that we're still having these conversations. We've moved the needle somewhat, but yet there's, even with our U.S. president last June, he signed an executive order for diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and access. In 2021, he had to sign an executive order to say, hello, everyone, this is important.
Yeah. I know it's. I don't even know what to say next. It's stunning, right? It is stunning, and I think it has something to do with, I think as the world browns, right? As the world browns, the segment of the society that wants to maintain the power, right, and the financial leadership is reacting. I feel like that's kind of, at the.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I was talking to, her name is Dr. Kimberly Harding, and she's a an expert in diversity and inclusion, and she speaks about allyship. But the one thing that she was talking about, and I loved how she symbolically um, framed the conversation about diversity and inclusion. She said, for us, we have to fight for our piece of the pie.
Mm.
But for others, you were just given the pie.
Mm.
But who is to say it was your pie in the first place?
I love that. That's well said. Well said. Yes.
Yes.
So interesting. So, the legacy. Of course, we all love this picture because we know what this picture represents, right?
Yes.
The accomplishment that, that Rosa was able to leave for us. But it's so interesting. I was able to find a scholar who did a family tree on Rosa Parks back to the 1300s. Isn't that amazing? Can you imagine somebody could actually get that far back in history? But the reason why she was able to do that is because in the ancestry, I get to claim this too, I suppose. We go all the way back to King James I of Scotland. And that actually takes in a lot of English royalty as well. And someone had said, and I don't know where I saw it, I'll have to go research it and find it again. If we all could do our ancestry back far enough, every single one of us comes from kings and slaves. Kings and slaves. So I think about, Rosa's ancestry back to King James of Scotland, and then come all the way down to Stephen Clendenin and his slave Elizabeth, right? So, it's like we all came from Mesopotamia. We were all brown. And then, King James of Scotland was Caucasian and Rosa was brown. And you know what I mean? It's like it's almost like we're cycling through. And we're
Yes.
all the descendants of kings and slaves. So yes, right? The legacy of, equity and inclusion and access and diversity. It's like, what conversation are we really having? What is this conversation really for? Except, that there's a segment of society that wants to maintain the power and financial advantage. I can't get anything else out of it. Try as I might, nothing else makes sense.
Agreed.
Right? Who said it was your pie? What do we have next?
Well, I know we have just a few more minutes, and you have some amazing family photos you want to take us through.
Well, let's see what's there. So, yeah, we can go quick. So this is my dad and Rosa, who are actually first cousins. Their dads are brothers. And Rosa was all about family. And it was really interesting because when we were together, and she came to everything. She was there for the wedding. She was there for the funeral. She was there for the family reunion. And when she was there, Rosa was being family. And don't ask her about this stuff. She wanted to be family. So I just wanted to show you that. And then this is just a collage. You could just have a fast peek, right? Rosa loved family. Family's important. Family are your primary relationships. Are you organized? My question, ladies, are you organized to attend to your relationships? Life is the people in your life and the conversations you have with them.
Yes.
So tend to your relationships. It's important. And do we have another? So this is Rosa's statue in Statuary Hall. We were really fortunate because Rosa made sure we were invited to everything. So we were able to be with her when Bill Clinton gave her the Medal of Freedom and when she received her Congressional Gold. And we were still invited when Barack Obama unveiled her statue at Statuary Hall, and her, all of her galas and birthday parties. And so, everybody gets to remember Rosa because she's been ensconced in history and in Statuary Hall in the Congress of the United States of America. Hats off to you, my lady.
Yes, yes.
And I think we got to the end of the deck. This is our lovely mother of the human rights, of the civil rights movement, and an elegant, graceful, faith-filled, courageous lady she was. And thank you for being bigger than you knew yourself to be, and everything that you've left us as motivation to be bigger than we know ourselves to be. Thank you, LaWanna.
Thank you. This has been amazing, insightful, and to our listening audience, I hope you enjoyed this journey, this beautiful story from a family member who knew Rosa Parks personally, and to see how these different traits, these different characteristics are relevant for us today, that we can take hold of these lessons and become empowered to stand up and be the change that we want to see in the world. It doesn't have to be on the grand scale of a Rosa Parks, but it's within our sphere of influence. Because think about this, ladies, if you change one life, you've changed generations. And before we go, I'm going to turn it over to you, Rose, for closing comments.
Thanks, LaWanna. Sometimes we're looking for the answer. I would say stay in the inquiry. Keep asking yourself, what is there for me to do now? What is it that I don't know or understand about why things are the way they are? How can I make a difference? Rosa never closed the book on anything. So let's just be open and stay in the inquiry, participate, listen, and make sure you have an image of the very best you, the one you are, the one you want to be.
Thank you so much, Rose Hampton, woman extraordinaire in your own right, making a difference and continuing to, even though you're retired from corporate, you are a brilliant and bright light of example of what it means to be in your lane of excellence, continue to rise, and then even post, sharing those lessons learned for those coming behind you can be encouraged and know that they too can be a legacy in the world. So I want to thank you so much for joining me for another edition of Business and Financial Raw Talk.
It was my pleasure.
And to those of you that are listening, remember that in life, when your vision intersects with opportunity, don't sit down, stand up, seize the moment, and know that change is inevitable. Until next time, bye everyone.